Crafty friends, it's Jess from jesscrafts.com, and today I'm here with day 4 of the Ocean Critters week, where I'm featuring Ocean Critter cards and a chance to win this Lawn Fawn Whale You Be Mine stamp set. For more details on how to win, be sure to listen to the end of the video, but basically we're just leaving comments on all of the videos this week. So, to get started, I am using Tim Holtz watercolor paper, and I like this watercolor paper because it is bright white. However, it doesn't take as much color and water as a thicker, higher quality watercolor paper. And it actually almost became a problem because the amount of ink that I use on today's card, but it did hold up. And so I'm spreading some clean water on this background because I want to limit where the ink is going to go. I don't want it to go all the way out to the edges, but instead I want to leave a little messy border around the edges. So I'm just painting sort of a large messy splotch in the center. And then I'm going to start dropping on some color. Instead of using watercolor today, I wanted something really deep and intense, but yet a little easier to control. So I'm going to be using Distress Reinkers. Now, they were even darker and more intense than I thought they were going to be, and I probably added too much because I wasn't sure how it was going to spread, and so at first I was adding more so that it would spread more naturally, but then I realized it was never going to fill the space and I was going to use like a crazy amount of ink. So I decided to stop adding more ink and to just kind of move it around. And so here you see I'm bending the paper, and because it's only going to go where I already put water, as I bend the paper, it's going to move around only in the wet areas. It's not going to come outside of those areas. And this almost did it for me. Like I thought, oh, this is going to work. I'm going to actually be able to just spread the color around. But then those areas where I put the drop in, you could really see that clear ring, and that's not really what I was going for. This is definitely an experiment. I had no idea how this would go when I first tried it out. I had just seen something online where basically someone had created a light color and then put a darker color over it in watercolor, and so they kind of created this like layered watercolor effect, and I was trying to sort of play around with that idea. So after I got down a layer of color, I just put it to the side because I wasn't sure what I was doing. And I stamped my Mermaid from the Newton's Nook Designs stamp set. And I'm going to color her with Inktense Pencils. I'm stamping her again on the Tim Holtz watercolor paper because I'm going to leave a white border around her. And I want it to match the cardstock base that I'm using. So here I am just drying off that watercolor piece because there was so much color on it. I just wanted it to kind of speed up the process, but then I let it finish air drying while I colored the Mermaid. So I'm just going to show you a small portion of the Mermaid coloring today. Right now I'm using Derwent Inktense Pencils. And I haven't used these in a while, but I do have other videos on my channel explaining these particular watercolor pencils. They are much more intense than your average watercolor pencil, but because of that, they have some different properties as well. With the Inktense pencils, you can lay on all of the color initially by just sort of scribbling it on with a pencil. You don't want to color the whole image with pencil because otherwise you're going to just get like a really solid, intense color. So I guess you don't not want to. It's just that like if you're looking for a blended effect, you don't want to put color everywhere because then you're going to get sort of a all over color. I hope that makes sense. So I just put a little bit of color on the edges so that the edges would be darker and then pulled the color towards the center so it would give some natural shading. Once I had a little bit of shading, I wanted to go back and add more detail. When you're using Inktense pencils, you don't really want to put the pencil on the wet paper. So what I was doing instead was I was taking my wet paintbrush and touching the wet paintbrush to the tip of the pencil to pick up color. I find that to be much more effective. When working with Inktense pencils, you want to consider that once they are dry, they are permanent and they cannot be continued to be moved around. So you want to work in small areas at a time, because if you work in a larger area, you color only a small portion, then you try to come back to it, the color's not going to move around, you're not going to be able to blend it back in. So you see that I worked on one half of the tail and then the other half of the tail. And again, I'm going to go back and add a little bit more color, more shading and detail by touching the wet brush to the pencil. I find that to be much more effective. You could possibly wait for the paper to dry and then add more color, like go in with the pencil again. But I find that this, is faster. So I would rather do that personally. If you don't want too dark of a color, I also feel like picking up the color right from the pencil gives you a little bit more control than putting the color down onto the surface when you begin. So now the original background is dry. The original background was in peacock feathers, and now I'm going to use Salty Ocean, I believe. Might be Mermaid Lagoon though. And I'm going to add a second layer. Like I mentioned before, the thing I was trying to go for is there to be a lighter color sticking out from the darker color so that they are layered together, but there's also like a clear distinction between the two. So again, I'm just going to drop in the color, and this time I'm going to go right in with the paintbrush because I realized last time that it just doesn't spread the way that I wanted it to, or the way that I thought that it might. Now, once I found that I wasn't getting as even of a coverage as I wanted, I was thinking of a different way to apply this ink, and I just put a small drop of the Distress Reinker onto it's like a little piece of plastic packaging, and I'm going to allow that to kind of add spot color. And the way that I'm going to get these little flicks is by mixing that Distress Reinker with just a bit of water, and then getting some on my small paintbrush here and flicking it on. I am using just the darker color for this, and so I just kind of tap the paintbrush against my finger. I find that the best way to get a nice spray of flicks throughout, and I find it to be important to move the paper around so that all of the flicks aren't facing in the same direction. When I work with this, I keep a clear plastic page divider underneath. Basically, I just want something so that the paper work surface that I'm on isn't absorbing this strong ink and, going through several layers of paper. So you might see that there's a plastic protection underneath. You could also use a craft sheet, of course. I wanted to add some detail and interest, so I picked a stencil. This one is the Wave Stencil from Simon Says Stamp. There are a lot of different wave stencils out there. This is just the first one I got my hands on, so it's kind of the one I tend to use, but Create a Smile has one that's really nice as well. I thought, oh, it'd be fun to spray some glitter, because as I mentioned earlier this week, when I think of mermaids, I think they should have glitter. I think of shimmer and that kind of thing with them. So I wanted to add some, shimmer to the background. However, this shimmer isn't quite like Perfect Pearls. This is the Sukaneko Shimmer Spritz, and it's much finer. So then I couldn't really see the detail of the stencil. It was just way too subtle. So I tried to think of another way I could get that detail of the stencil on there. And this is Distress ink, so it will react with water. So I'm going to take a baby wipe, place it over the stencil, and then press the stencil really firmly. I thought at first a brayer might help, but actually it's better to go in with your fingers so that you can really get in between the waves or the lines of the stencil and try to pull up as much ink as you can. I think leaving it there longer would probably be better, or maybe even going a second time through you could lift up more color, but this created a really nice subtle pattern. And I like the way that it turned out. So you see there, I just kept lifting the baby wipe in the stencil, seeing how it was going, and then you could put it back down. So that's nice that you can get a feel for what it's going to look like before you fully commit. And if you need to go in and take out more color, you can. Once I had the background the way that I liked it, I was ready to add a sentiment. The sentiment is also from the same Newton's Nook Designs stamp set. It says, "Have a fantastic birthday." I needed a lot of birthday cards recently, so you can tell that most of the cards this week have been birthday cards for that reason, or birthday projects. And I'm just going to stamp it with my Mystiques, like I mentioned before. With watercolor paper, you're a little bit more likely to make a mistake with your stamping because the surface isn't perfectly even. However, I find that if you use the VersaFine ink, it usually does a fine job. The VersaFine ink is a sticky pigment ink, so it's my favorite for sentiments, as long as you don't need to use Copics over it. And so I will place my mermaid down with some foam tape, and that will be it for the card. Now, as I mentioned before, there is a giveaway associated with my Ocean Critters Week, and you can win this Will You Be Mine stamp set. I have all the details on screen, but basically just leave a comment on this video or any of the videos and all of the videos in the Ocean Critters series by Sunday, August 14th at midnight. Comment on all 5 videos to increase your chance to win. It's open worldwide, so everyone can enter, and if you're watching this video, you're probably a fan of critters, so I invite you to join us in our critter-loving card makers and paper crafters group. I know many of you who've been following this series have already joined us over there, and I'm so happy to see more people there. I hope you continue to share your projects over there so we can continue to get inspired by you. So that is it for my card and video today. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. If you are interested in more crafting tutorials, be sure to subscribe to my channel. I usually share at least one video a week, and I will leave you a link to all of the products in the video description below. Thanks for watching. Bye.